Hello. Do you ever really own your own home? In America, local jurisdictions impose property taxes on individuals' land and private residences, which raises the question if you buy a house and you live on it, you consider that your own private property, and yet you have to continue writing a check to the government every year just for the privilege of being able to use property that you supposedly already own. And that's different than how we normally do things in America. You go to a store, you buy a big screen TV, you pay a sales tax on it, then you go home and you hang it on your wall. You don't keep paying taxes to the government indefinitely. And so when you have property taxes, it's effectively like paying rent to the government. You never truly own your own home if that sort of Damocles is always hanging over you. In Florida, we want to do something about that. We are the free state of Florida, and partially because we don't have an income tax, and we never will as long as I have anything to say about it. But we've seen over the last particularly 4 or 5 years, as people have flooded into Florida, as demand to live here has gone up, that has fueled an increase in property values. We've also had a period of Biden inflation, which drove the cost of everything up as well. And so you have people that are living in their homes, all of a sudden, their homes are being assessed at 50% more, 100% more, or sometimes even more than that than what it was worth just 5 or 6 years ago. And guess what? They get a higher tax bill as a result. So property taxes have pinched many people throughout the state of Florida. That's the number one way we can provide meaningful relief for the citizens of our state. And so we're going to tackle that, as well as some of the efforts we're doing on immigration enforcement and how Florida handles spending and debt, in contrast to how Washington, D.C. has handled it. And I'm pleased to be joined by our fearless conservative warrior in the Florida Senate, Blaise Ingoglia, that represents Hernando County, Citrus County. I think you have some of Pasco and some of Sumter, right?
All of Sumter.
All of Sumter County. So those of you who know about the Villages retirement community, this is the guy that is representing there. And I think he's actually conservative enough for the Villages, which is not easy to do. So you've been a leader on the property tax front. You're also a home builder, so you know these issues very well. What's the philosophy that we should be pursuing as Republicans in Florida vis-a-vis property taxes?
Fiscal constraint on behalf of local governments, because what we've seen, and look, this is the second time we've seen this in about 20 years. Same thing happened in the middle of 2000. You had a rise in property values, which then had a rise in property taxes. Then government just took the money, expanded government beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and then the recession hit. And we saw that local governments were forced to cut their budgets because they had less revenue. But in the middle of that, we had a property tax revolt. We had people showing up at county commission meetings demanding that they cut government, and they didn't want to. And in 2010, we finally got some property tax relief. Fast forward now, and I will tell you, back in the middle of 2000s, we had no problems going to county commission meetings because we were majority Democrat back then. But now we have almost the same dynamic happening, but the success is coming to the state of Florida. People are moving in, so we have a limited amount of supply. Demand has increased, and we're seeing the same rise in property taxes, the expansion of federal government. But now we have a lot of Republicans, our own Republicans, that are on these county commissions. So we should treat both of these equally, is that we need to throttle back local government spending. And the only way to do that is by property tax relief, which people are clamoring for right now.
So you actually raise a good point about 10, 15 years ago, a lot of these places were Democrat. Mm-hmm. In Florida now, we have 1.3 million more registered Republicans, which just 6 years ago would have been unthinkable when we had more Democrats. Is it your sense, because I know you got involved in being active with local government, his Twitter. Hey, what's your Twitter handle?
@GovGoneWild.
And that's because you were saying local governments were going wild at the time with the taxing and spending. So people, you should definitely check out his feed on that. But what we've seen, it seems to me, is now people know, like in your district, you can't get elected as a D. Like you have no chance. So I think you have people that are going in the Republican Party, particularly at the local level, and they do run as Republicans. But then when they get in, it's more of a tax and spend mentality than what we're supposed to believe in as Republicans of fiscal conservatism.
It is the most frustrating thing is that people will govern one way and campaign one way and then govern the complete opposite way they get there. But you brought up a very good point, Governor, is that there is no way in many places, the vast amount of places in the state of Florida, that they can get elected as a Democrat. They have to turn to a Republican. Doesn't mean that they've embraced our ideology, our thought process on government and limited government and more freedom. It's just that they become political opportunists and they realize that's the only way to get elected. But when they take their votes, they do the same exact thing as they would as they were Democrats. So it's a little concerning from the way I look at this is that if I see a Democrat in office switch to Republican, big red flag. If I see somebody, a Democrat, switch to Republican right before the cutoff to run as a Republican, even bigger red flag. We have to look past the rhetoric and look at what they actually do and actually what they believe. Because if we don't, we're going to go down this road for the next 20 years as Democrats masquerading as Republicans.
So in Florida, property taxes are local. There's a little bit of state in terms of the education funding, but by and large, this is a power for local governments. And we're in a situation. We do have this homestead exemption, but that's outdated. It hasn't kept up with inflation. And so you've got a lot of folks who have homes. They've owned it for maybe decades, and now they're getting these tax bills because their homes are now worth 3 times what it was. And I think the question is there a prospect to just actually own your home? And I think the answer to that in Florida is yes, because people do rely on property tax revenue to fund a lot of local services, police. They use it to fund education and some of those things, which are very important, which we'll keep funding. But if you look at how much the budgets have grown, it's gone way beyond what you would need to do the core services that everybody talks about, which is number one. And so if they just went back to what they were spending even 5 years ago, you would be able to have massive pool of money to be able to do this. But the other thing is we have 142 million visitors a year. I think a good tax system for Florida is to take burden away from our own residents and shift it more to some of the tourism-related stuff, which we could do very easily. So the goal is to have people, own their own home and then not have to worry about cutting. Fine, you tax them when they buy it or whatever that is, but then at some point it's done. And I think we can get there.
I do too. A consumption tax obviously would be much preferred, and that's what you're talking about.
Well, I'm not talking about anything at the state. I mean, we will not do anything on tax in terms of additional tax. We'll just lower tax. We got big surpluses or whatever. But, these local governments, it's like, to be taxing people's property the way they are, I think that they have an ability to do other things for sure. And I think it would cause the state to boom.
Yeah, and that's the point I was getting at, is that you take the burden away from the property owners and the Floridians and you put it on people who are consuming the taxes, which means probably anywhere between 20 to 30% of the visitors should pick up that tab. So I agree with you. I think this is something that we could eventually get to. You've brought up this prospect. I know there are a bunch of people in the legislature who would much rather have a property tax relief because they're hearing it from the constituents over other proposals. We're seeing that. But I agree, the state will continue to boom. And we do not know what the economy is going to be next year. We don't know what's going to be 5 years from now. But the easiest way to have any booming economy is to put the money back in the hands of the people who pay for it. I think government, especially local government, forgets that it's not their money, it's the taxpayers' money. And they have this view these days that anytime they want extra money, they'll just put a referendum on the ballot. They don't even think about fiscal responsibility. And how do I know this? Our appropriations process in the House and the Senate, you have a lot of local governments asking for dollars for local projects. And we look for matches, 30% matches or 50% matches. So if there's a $10 million project and they want $5 million from state government and appropriated to them, a lot of times we ask them to put $5 million up. So here, they're crying poor that they have to raise taxes and raise all this extra revenue, but they have all this extra money to put in a $5 million matching. So it just doesn't match up. So local governments need to be more fiscally responsible, and whether they're doing it by will or by force would be a constitutional amendment, the state will boom.
Well, one of the things we're doing is doging local governments. We've got a number that have volunteered. We're working with the legislature to get more prescriptive authority. I know there may be other ways in state government to be able to do it, but I think having that Doge process there will really help bring transparency to how the money's being spent. I mean, some of these counties that have had massive increases in the budget that have far outstripped inflation and population growth, those citizens need to know that. And then they got to be asked, okay, you're paying more property taxes to fund this, to fund the things, not the things everyone agrees on, but all this. And that's not something that they want to do. Now, a constitutional amendment would provide constitutional restraint on local government's ability to tax people property. And I would, there's different ways you can draft that. And obviously you need to get 60% of the vote. I think if you had a strong amendment, I think we have a good chance to get 60% of the vote when that's put on the ballot. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I actually think it'll be north of 70% because it is that important. But I want to piggyback off of your point because I think this is very, very important. Over the last 5 years, the data has shown us that local government's general fund budgets, which is where property taxes go into, have expanded anywhere between 60 to 120%. So they are taking that extra money. They're not even being anywhere near frugal with the money. They're just expanding government. And they'll be the first ones to say that we can't cut back. Well, one of the reasons why they have a problem is because they've expanded government. They hired people that they didn't need. They're spending money on things that they shouldn't be spending on. So I totally 100% agree with you that if local governments were actually doged, and a light was shown on what they're actually spending that money on, why their general fund budgets have doubled, why their property taxes, there would be a revolt against local government. And I think that's the way we're headed. So I like being ahead of the curve. I like us talking about this issue now. I don't want us to hit a point like we did in the mid-2000s. Governments, not only should governments cut, governments should prepare to be cut. Any constitutional amendment is going to go on a ballot in 2026. It's not going to be implemented in 2027. If I was local government, if I was a local county commissioner, I would be telling my local county commissioners and my government, hey, let's cut 5% now. Let's cut 5% the next year. Let's ease into it because the cuts are coming because this is what the people want.
Do you think obviously the people want to see this? What's your sense in the legislature to put an amendment on the ballot? You'd have to get, 60%?
Yeah.
You have to get 2/3 to get on the ballot. So you need that House and Senate. Now, we have way more than 2/3 of each body that are Republicans, but that doesn't mean that the leadership would want to do it. My sense is that there has been a lot of support in the Senate to do something.
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot of support amongst a lot of members in the legislature altogether. I think there's a lot of Republicans in the House and the Senate that want to do it. I think they're just gone, some in the other chamber, specifically the House, I think they've gone down the wrong path, just my opinion, and I think they should be focusing a lot of their efforts into helping cut local government spending, because that's where a lot of the excesses that we're seeing. And I think there's a lot of people that I think it would be voted on overwhelmingly. In fact, I think that a lot of the Democrats, because it's such a big issue, would actually vote to put on the ballot also.
Yeah, and so the one objection that I hear is, well, this property tax revenue, fine, like a Miami, they have a lot of tourists, they can do like hotel tax or something, they could do something if they needed to backfill revenue. And obviously they should be focused on reducing spending, but let's say they had to do that. But some of our rural, fiscally constrained counties, wouldn't necessarily be able to do that because they don't have the same stream. We ran the numbers, and if you completely eliminated property tax on every primary resident, homesteaded residence for a Florida resident, we have like 28, 30 fiscally constrained counties, something like that. To backfill all that revenue would be $300 million a year, which for us is easy to do with our surplus. Now, I wouldn't say you would backfill 100% of it because they need to make some adjustments too. But those who say, oh, well, the rural areas wouldn't be able to, I'm totally willing to offer a bridge financially from the state if it means that we can get people to get property tax relief. So I think like every way we look at it, there's ways to get this done. We just got to have leadership. Another area where we had to show leadership in Florida is on immigration. So the 2024 election, I think either issue 1 or issue 1B was the border and immigration enforcement.
I think it was 1A and 1B.
Okay, there you go. So, and you had, because we've had presidents. I mean, actually, if you look back in the 90s, like Clinton enforced immigration law. He signed some strong immigration legislation. It was really Obama where they started to turn as Democrats into just open borders enthusiasts. And I think part of it was political. They think if illegals come, they can get amnestied and then ultimately be Democrat voters. I think part of it is they just think that borders shouldn't matter and that somehow they're all citizens of the world anyways. I think there's a lot of liberal ideology that goes into that. And so he really, I think, did a different posture. He did some unconstitutional actions. But even Obama did deport some people. Biden came in and just opened the damn border. And you've never seen anything like it, to have millions and millions of people. They literally, we sent people down in 2021 to help. We would stop people, Florida law enforcement, Texas law enforcement, turn them over to Border Patrol. And these Border Patrol are good guys, but they're being told, write them a citation and release them into the country. So we had this massive problem. And yes, we had to send to Martha's Vineyard. Texas sent to New York. There were things that happened to raise the visibility of it. But this was something that really was important for a lot of Americans. And so when President Trump beat Kamala Harris, we then had the recognition in Florida, Biden neutered ICE for 4 years. They are not going to have the resources or the manpower to be enforcing immigration law to the way it needs to be. You got to have the state and locals involved. There had been programs called 287G where state and locals can sign up. Now, the federal government can't commandeer state and locals, but we want to help. And so we wanted to do that. Now, I could order all the state agencies to participate. The locals, I couldn't necessarily order. We needed legislation. So I called a special session of the Florida legislature in January, said, when the president takes office, they're going to issue big executive orders. We got to be ready to go. And there were some kind of twists and turns to that process, but we eventually landed on Florida being the only state in the country that requires all state and local law enforcement agencies to actively participate in the enforcement of federal immigration law. Yes, we're not a sanctuary jurisdiction. When you were in the House, we banned sanctuary cities, which should have happened long before I got here, but we did do that, which was good. So we're not a sanctuary state, but you cannot be a sanctuary state and just sit on your hands. What we impose the duty is you got to be on the team. You got to be part of this. And so now all law enforcement agencies that are signed up with ICE nationwide, if you look at all of them, more than half of them are in the state of Florida. Now, we had opposition to that when we were trying to do, and we did a bunch of other things in that legislation. But, you were one of the ones that were very strong on this. You're a home builder. A lot of people say, that home builders want all the cheap labor. But I think you've been, not just this year, but all of our immigration legislation, I think you've been the author of since I've gotten here.
Yeah, because it's important. And you bring up a good point with me being a home builder. Just because I'm a home builder or if somebody's in agriculture doesn't necessarily mean that you lose your conservative values and you don't believe in the rule of law anymore. But let's not forget that this started back in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was promised immigration reform in exchange for part amnesty. And he gave the amnesty, didn't get the reforms. And it's been Republicans and Democrats that have let this fester, and they've been using it as a political football. And it was that environment that led to Biden doing what he did. But the recognition that we cannot continue down this path for too long, it's going to destroy the country. So yeah, I am a builder. We make sure, our company makes sure that everyone is legal who works on our job sites. But at the end of the day, I will never, ever trade profits for human trafficking, human smuggling, fentanyl killing our community. So I am proud that we led, that I was one of the leaders against anti-illegal immigration. I mean, and just look where we are now with your leadership and what we've been able to do. Florida leads with getting rid of aliens from the state of Florida. I saw a chart the other day. It's like not even close. It's us, and then everyone else is a distant second. And that's important because I think when there are big national issues that come that percolate up, everyone looks to see what Florida is doing, right? We've seen it with school choice. We're seeing it with immigration. We see it with how fiscally prudent we are in terms of socking money away in a rainy day fund and being fiscally responsible. So this to me is just another one along the lines of the state of Florida, our governor, our legislature, not listening to the naysayers, doing what we believe is right, and we are going to reap the fruits of our labor later, and that's going to be a strong economy with no illegal immigration.
Well, it's interesting because we have led on these things. You look at, we were the first state to eliminate DEI from our public universities. We led on parents' rights. We did all this stuff. And other states have done a lot similar. And now even, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times are writing articles about Trump administration holding higher ed accountable, which is great. And they're saying, this is what Florida's been doing now for the last few years. On immigration, though, it's interesting because I thought when we did our bill, and when we got all the agreements signed and you saw the progress, I thought there'd be a lot of pressure on other Republican legislatures to do something similar. And we really haven't seen anything even approaching what Florida's done. Now, President Trump, within the last, I think, week and a half, issued an executive order that had a number of things in it. But one of the things he says, he's calling on state and locals to cooperate with the federal government. He cannot commandeer them. It's a federal issue of federalism. So they can't sabotage, but they really don't have to help unless there's a duty imposed on them. So I'm hoping this executive order will turn the light bulbs on some of these Republican states to say, wait a minute, we lead in E-Verify, the number of E-Verifies. It's not even close compared to these other ones. And then we're leading in immigration enforcement. And it's one thing to say we're a little bit ahead, but we're way ahead. Some of these guys aren't doing anything. We've been really good partners with the Trump administration on it. But, what do you attribute to some of these red state legislatures not being willing to really go full bore on illegal immigration? I think some people will say, it's all about that they don't want to interrupt the flow of cheap labor into their states.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really do, because it is frustrating, because when we just made the comment, I made the comment before that immigration was 1A and 1B. You have been a leader on it. President Trump campaigned on it. This should be a slam dunk for every Republican legislature. It shouldn't even be a question. Every single legislature, especially the southern states, the more Republican states, should be mimicking exactly what we're doing. But they're not. And you have to ask the question, which you're asking right now, is the answer is why. And I don't know if it's big business. I don't know if it's they just feel more compassionate, which I don't understand. I don't understand how you can have compassion for somebody coming over the border illegally when you're actually creating the environment where families are being and communities are being crushed by the inflow of and the influx of illegal immigrants into communities. I don't understand why, but I can probably boil it down to they're just not used to leading on these issues. They're not used to being held accountable for their campaign promises, because I guarantee you, every single piece of literature, especially the ones that have been in Congress, said, I'm going to be strong on illegal immigration. But the very first time they have the vote, they waffle on it. Now, why is it waffling? Is it leadership in DC telling them to have to vote in a certain way? Is it special interests out there saying that, hey, you don't understand the full scope of what you're asking for? No. People need to say, I do understand, but I'm voting to crack down on illegal immigration anyway. So I wish that more people had to resolve the backbone and the spine to do what the state of Florida is. The question is, are they going to be able to do it in time for them to cut off this crisis? And time will tell.
Well, that's the thing. When I sent people to the border in 2021 after Biden opened it, the media and some of the we're not a border state. Why are you sending there? And in reality was the people that were being interdicted by our guys, they would be asked, where's your ultimate destination? And it was like a third of them were Florida, sometimes even higher, depending on where you were. And so I think that part of having a secure border is, yes, building the wall, doing all that, but it's also removing enticements to come. If you remove taxpayer benefits, why would they be allowing illegals on Medicaid? You got to have no federal taxpayer benefits, and we don't have any in the state as it is in Florida, but you should have no enticements to come in terms of tax benefits, taxpayer benefits or welfare. But then also, if they think that going to Florida, they're likely to get deported because we do enforce, that's a huge deterrent to come in the first place. And so if more states do it, it'll be a deterrent to come to the U.S. entirely. As it is now, if it's like Florida leading, a lot of these other states being a little bit more milquetoast, then I think some folks, the border's much better under President Trump, no question. But if they can get to some of these other states, I think they feel like they probably are in pretty good shape. So when you're enforcing immigration law, like some of the Operation Tidal Wave, some of the things that we've done in conjunction with DHS, yes, you're removing aliens. Some of them are criminal aliens. Some of them have active deportation orders, you name it. But it also deters others from wanting to come in the future. And I think that with the lack of action by some of the other states, I think that deterrence could be so much stronger if they just stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, deterrence is a big thing when it comes to illegal immigration. But on the converse, the magnet, to your point, is that you have that same problem. Look at what California was doing. California has funds that they will set up to do your legal defense. If an illegal immigrant winds up getting arrested, they get free healthcare, they get free education. They actually, and I don't know if the program is still there, but I know that there was a program in the state of Florida that you can actually get transgender surgery if you come across the border, and it was happening in the state of California. So the magnet to me, for a migrant to come to the United States legally should be, for one thing, opportunity. It shouldn't be for handouts. I don't know if as a nation you want a nation of people who are crossing the border because they're getting something. I think people should be crossing the border because they want to give something to the country. And I think we got it backwards.
And I think we've led, and some of this is your legislation. So yes, no taxpayer benefits, no ID cards, so no driver's license. We don't let counties issue IDs to illegals. We don't even let private groups issue IDs to illegals, removing an enticement. In-state tuition for illegals, that happened before I was governor. Were you in the House at that time?
No, or okay. I would have been screaming from the roof.
Yeah. So that was like a decade ago that Florida actually did that. You and I had worked for years to try to unwind it. Finally, we landed that. I mean, why would you charge an American citizen that lives in Thomasville, Georgia, more for a state university than somebody whose parents aren't even citizens of residents of Florida or aren't even allowed to be here? So we've rectified that as well. One of the things federally, I know the Supreme Court's considering is this birthright citizenship issue. The 14th Amendment, meant if you had a right to be here, then you could have citizenship upon birth. But I don't think they ever intended people could sneak across the border, have a child, and somehow citizenship would attach in those instances. But it's never really been fully litigated by the Supreme Court. I'm not sure if this current court would rule in favor of removing that enticement. It seems like
it's scary though.
Well, they have. I mean, it's it's interesting in like law school and stuff. They kind of drum into you that birthright, anyone, doesn't matter, you're born here, it is. That's actually not what the Supreme Court ever did. There was this case involving this Chinese. It was a Chinese, I guess, American, because he was born here. The parents were legal immigrants, so they had a right to be here under U.S. law. They did not have citizenship, but then the question was, does the child born in America under those circumstances have citizenship? And this U.S. Supreme Court said yes, per the 14th Amendment. And that may be true, but that doesn't mean that if those parents snuck into the country illegally, that you would get citizenship on there. So it creates a lot of problems. And so that, I think employment's the number one enticement, but I do think this birthright citizenship, because if you come, once you do that, it's kind of an anchor. And then you have the question of if the parents or even just one of the parents is found to be here illegally and should be removed, well, you have a 2-year-old kid maybe that has nominal U.S. citizenship. Do they go back with it just creates a whole bunch of problems. That was not the intention of the 14th Amendment.
But I think that case that you're referring to, because I'm sort of familiar with that case, actually overturned a longstanding Supreme Court precedent that I think there was a ruling in, I want to say 1887, 10 years after the Constitution was
after
signed.
The 14th Amendment.
Right, yes. Where the Supreme Court actually reiterated what the actual strict constructionist view of what they meant. So that, the case that you're talking about, I think overturned longstanding a longstanding Supreme Court ruling,
Well,
but
I
then
think
it basically opened up the floodgates.
it was
on
the
that.
issue of, I mean, the reason why the 14th Amendment was ratified, I mean, there was a bunch of issues involved in that, but on the citizenship question was to overturn Dred Scott v. Sanford,
Yes.
which is in the 1850s, and the U.S. Supreme Court, and probably one of its worst decisions in its history, said that, Dred Scott, he was a freed slave. There was litigation that ensued, and basically they said he didn't have standing because he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He couldn't be because of his race. And so Lincoln rejected that. The Republican Party rejected that. And so when they did the post-Civil War amendments, that provision of the 14th Amendment was to clarify that Dred Scott was wrong. That if you are, regardless of whether you're white or black, you're an American citizen. I mean, because obviously, the freed slaves were here. They didn't break into the country. So it was crystal clear on that. Beyond that, they were not talking about illegal immigration.
Right.
So we need to get that right. But you brought up the issue of, on immigration, people sending out the literature when they're campaigning, always talking to. You will never see anyone running in a Republican primary that will stand before a group of 150 Republicans at some meeting and go soft on illegal immigration.
Well, they might. They would lose.
They would lose, right? So, I mean, anyone with so they're going to do that. So they all say that, and yet they get cold feet or whatever. Well, I think the same thing is true on spending and debt. We have these guys. They campaign against Biden inflation, Biden debt, Biden spending, and yet they get up there, and we're right now under a continuing resolution that is basically Biden's budget. So they punted on an opportunity to do something transformational. Now they're in the midst of this battle over this reconciliation. But a lot of that, there's things that are overruled, or that are peeling back what Trump did in 2017. One of the best things he did in that tax bill was get rid of the SALT deduction. Yeah. They're trying to put that back in so that New York, California, they get a break. If they have high taxes, they get to write it off on their federal taxes. That is not good policy. But the spending levels, really, the Green New Deal is not eliminated. Most of the spending cuts are 4 or 5 years into the future. And I think it's just different how Florida does it versus how they do it in D.C. If we say we're going to cut spending, that means whatever we're spending now, we will spend less. When Washington says they're going to cut spending, they have a 10-year projection where they anticipate spending to increase dramatically. And if they just say we're going to spend a little lower than the anticipated increase, still increasing spending a lot, they'll say that's a, quote, cut. Yeah. So they can say you have $1.5 trillion cut, when in reality, you're spending a lot more 10 years from now than you are. And I can tell you, any type of spending restraint that is put in years beyond the current Congress never happens. So you got to do it now to be able to really make an impact. And I think that if you look at what guys campaign on and then you look at what they actually vote on, there's just a big gap in terms of their rhetoric versus their actions.
Yeah, they're cutting the rate of spending. They're cutting super egregious spending to just egregious spending. Instead of taking your car and putting your foot on the gas pedal at 100 miles an hour going over the fiscal cliff, you're just taking it off a little and you're going 80 miles an hour over the fiscal cliff. At the end of the day, the federal government has a spending, they have a debt problem, they have an unfunded liabilities problem, and so nothing that they're doing right now, in my opinion, is actually getting to the heart of the matter. To your point, is that they're not cutting spending. What we really need to do is we need structural reform, and I know you have been big on that. A balanced budget amendment to the federal government, to Congress. Something has to be put in place where they can't do this. Some sort of national taxpayer bill of rights, because I think people are going to have a conversation with their kids and their grandkids, and they're going to come to you and me, and they're going to say, Grandpa DeSantis or Grandpa Ingoglia, why didn't you stop this when you had a chance? And I think people in Congress need to start asking themselves that question. I would be okay, personally, as a fiscal conservative, with short-term deficits if it meant long-term sustainability. But we're not even seeing that, and that's the problem.
No, in fact, I think that when that's promised, it's undone by future Congresses. And, you got to look, there's a yin and a yang in politics. Democrats will take over the House at some point. Again, we have a 5-vote majority. Maybe that'll happen in 2026. Hopefully not. But I mean, eventually this stuff moves back and forth. One party's never in control for very long. And so that's just the reality in terms of now, a balanced budget amendment. I think most people know there's two ways you could propose amendments to the Constitution. 2/3 of each House of Congress can propose it, write it, send it to the states, or 2/3 of the states can propose it, write it, and then send it to the states for ratification. In each instance, you need 3/4 of the states to ratify a constitutional amendment. And so in the 90s, the Senate was one vote short of sending a balanced budget amendment to the state for ratification. This is when we had a balanced budget. And if that had gone through and been ratified, just think of the difference the trajectory of this country would be on having that balanced budget amendment in place for the last 25 years. I mean, it would have really, really changed the incentives and made a big difference. And so now we don't think Congress is going to be willing to act on their own, obviously. So we're working, and Florida has already certified this through the Article 5 process. I think we've got 28, 29 states. There's some in the hopper. You got to get to 34 to trigger the amendment, being able to write the amendment, and then passing it and sending it to the states. But I think that this is absolutely necessary, because even if somehow they decided to be very fiscally responsible, say they just said, you know what, we're going to rein in spending right now, we're going to go back to pre-COVID, we're going to freeze it, we're going to do all that. Future Congresses will undo it. None of these deals stick. And so the only way you're going to be able to do it is to just permanently change the incentives. And I think you need a balanced budget requirement for the Constitution. I mean, think about Florida. We have to balance the budget. There's not even a question going into a legislative session that we got to make it work fiscally. Now, we've been flush with cash because our economy's been good. People have come down here. But you remember when COVID, happened. We didn't know what was going to happen. I think the legislature had passed the budget right as COVID was ramping up with the 15 days to slow the spread. And I had to figure out, okay, so I vetoed a lot of stuff. I vetoed some of my stuff because I just didn't know, right? Turned out we ended up running big surpluses, and we continued to do that. But there's never even a question that we've got to make all this work. And in Florida this year, we're spending less than we did last year, like in actual terms, not a less of an increase. We don't consider it a cut if you're spending even a penny more. We're spending less this year. We've paid down 41% of our state's total debt for all of our state's history. And I know you've been supportive of our accelerated debt repayment program, which you retire the debt early at discounted prices, and then you save hundreds of millions of dollars on interest. And so we're doing that. That's why we have a AAA credit rating. So all of this stuff can be done, but it just requires, I think, to say like you're just going to elect the right people, ultimately in the long run, different people get elected, right? So, but the fact that we have structural constraints, I think, here in Florida, and including a line item veto, which I can use, and I've had to use for billions of dollars, I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to be successful. If the legislature could have charged everything on the credit card over all these years, you probably would have seen a culture of deficit spending develop.
Yeah, and I cannot underestimate the importance of the structure. I mean, you brought up the point about how much we would be better off as a nation. How much wealthier would we be off as a nation? A lot of the money that we are borrowing right now in order to sustain the federal government is we're monetizing the debt through the Fed, and we're borrowing it from countries that hate us. China is one of our biggest debt holders. If we want to get into fiscal warfare with the Chinese, that's an easy way to do it. But when you do not have that, think about this. We're going to be close to spending $1 trillion just on the interest of the debt over the next 5 or 6 years. We may be.
I think we're there.
And just imagine the historic investments we can put in the infrastructure in the United States if we didn't have to spend that $1 trillion. You want to fix the airports with the FAA, with the total overhaul in terms of technology, there's a way to do it. You want to fix the roads and the bridges, there's $1 trillion every year that we could be putting towards making this country better. But this addiction to spending and the inability of people in Congress to say no to spending will be the downfall. And look, I'm not worried about Democrats. I'm more worried about Republicans who don't stand up in what we believe in, which will be the downfall of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interest on the debt has escalated. I mean, it used to be, I mean, I think even like 7, 8 years ago, it was like 200 billion a year. Now it's $1 billion. I think it's even probably more than $1 billion. But as you service more debt, you're going to service it at higher rates, and that's going to continue to go up. And it kind of creates a vicious cycle. So, but people have known that. I mean, they knew that that was going to be something. And I think a lot of people in Congress just decided that they just keep spending. One of the things that's frustrating for me is Elon Musk and the Doge efforts. They came in, they were doing a lot of good work going through these agencies. They uncovered, which honestly Congress should have known about. Maybe they did, and they support it. But all this USAID money, basically money going to all these.
Is that Marco's fourth job? Is that what it is?
All these all these left wing groups, and that's billions of dollars, and they've identified a bunch of stuff, and yet what they're debating in Congress, none of those Doge reductions are in. They did a continuing resolution in March that didn't have any of the Doge cuts in, and it doesn't look like they're doing it going forward. And it's like, to me, it seems like a very big missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And some of the stuff that Elon and Doge have picked up, or some of the stuff that the GAO was reporting on, it's like I don't think anyone in Congress ever read a GAO report. They like to waste.
Well, that's the thing.
Stuff.
I mean, as much as I thought what Elon was doing was good, you'd have these congressmen. They'd go on cable news, and they would be like cheering on Elon, and I'm just like, wait a minute, that's your job. Yeah. You have the power of the purse. AID, you should have never written those checks if you didn't know what was going on. But when you have a culture of just continuing resolution, omnibus bill, all that stuff, it just gets lost in the shuffle. And then a member of Congress said, you're going to either fund the government or we're going to shut down. And that's just not the way to govern. Now, one of the things, in addition to balanced budget amendment, I think would be good for structural, and I think you agree, is term limits for members of Congress. I think it works better here in the legislature to have term limits. And I think Florida's been very productive. Over certainly my tenure has been amazing with the legislative reforms that have been done. In Congress, you get in, and it's like you got to play the game, you got to drink the Kool-Aid, and you got to stay there, and that's the incentives. Well, you're not going to want to, exert leadership on changing the fiscal course of the country or really delving in these. You're going to lay low and just stay in office. So I think doing term limits also through Article 5, Florida has certified. I know you supported that when it happened. I think we now have 12 states. Some other states are on the dock. I think you're going to see 5, 10, 15 states come on board pretty quickly to this. It is going to get momentum because I've never seen an issue, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, rich, poor, black, white, male, female, people support term limits because they understand these incumbents go in, they're there too long. They rig the system to benefit incumbents. It's hard to dislodge them unless they retire. And we need new blood. And so I'm a big supporter of it. I've worked with some legislatures around the country urging them to follow Florida's lead. And I think it would be really, really positive.
Yeah, look, it is my belief that they just become way too disconnected with the people who put them there in the first place. They wind up, to your point, they go up to DC, they start drinking the Kool-Aid. A lot of them live up there 365 days a year. They're very rarely back in the district. I think that people in Congress should be back in the district as often as possible. But, you've been up there. There's a lot of votes that you have to take up there. But they become too disconnected with the people who are actually, and I think that's why there's huge push.
What they do is they carve out time for fundraising. So they're not actually legislating. They'll go in for 2-3 days, then they have a fundraising week and this and that. And it's hard to build legislative momentum, when you're doing that. So much of the calendar even is built around them being able to stay in office by raising money and building up their campaign chest. And that's not the way that you want to go about this if you really want to see positive reform. So I know it's popular. I know you're going to see more movement on it.
It's an 85% issue.
But I just think if you look at the performance of Congress over the last quarter century, you can't just say if we have a good election here and there, it's all going to get better. That hasn't worked. So I think you need the structural reforms, balanced budget amendment, term limits. I also think the president should have a line item veto. If they put an omnibus on his desk, let him hack out tens of billions of dollars in waste. I think that would be really, really positive. So, but you and I are in agreement on that. It's interesting. voters overwhelmingly support it. People that are elected, a lot of them, they don't really like it as much, but you've been a big champion on that. So what are the prospects for the Florida Gators in 2025 for football?
You really want to cause me some pain here, Gov, don't you?
Well, they ended the year good.
We ended the year a lot better than I thought we were going to do. I am hoping and praying that Coach Napier, makes me eat my words. Because this team, I've never seen anybody recruit talent and build a program like Billy Napier has. He's been amazing. The on the field stuff, I've been very skeptical about. Running the offense, I think that Lagway as quarterback and his ability to rally the team and be a leader on the field covers for a lot of the shortcomings from Napier as a play caller. But the team that they have assembled through the transfer portal, and I think we got 2 or 3 5-star picks that are going to be on offense, right? Well, one on defense, and we got 2 on offense. One was a transfer. These guys are studs. So I think we have an opportunity to win 9 or 10 games. And in the SEC, that may be playoff bound. I hope.
No, I think if you get 10, I think you're in
the SEC, yeah.
For sure. They got to play Arch Manning in Texas. Now that's in the swamp.
But we're used to beating Mannings.
Yeah,
we're used to that.
We're used to that. Those were interesting days back when Peyton would roll into town. Peyton, he never beat Florida in 4 years.
That's right.
He was the best quarterback in the country for probably a number of those years. They got to go at, I think, Texas A&M. Which is not easy. I think they got to go at LSU, which is not easy.
It's the toughest schedule in college football.
It's really tough. And then obviously Florida, Georgia, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville.
Which I've never been to.
Oh man, you got to do it. So it's interesting. I was probably governor for maybe a year, and I had some folks come to me and they said, hey. We think that if we didn't do the Florida-Georgia game in Jacksonville and did home and home with Georgia, that University of Florida could make more money off that. And I said, well, maybe so. But if you think I'm going to be the governor that gives up the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, you've got another thing coming. So that game will remain in Jacksonville if I have anything to say about it. Now, there is going to be a home and home because that stadium is going to be renovated. So I think there'll be 2 years, but the goal is to go back, and I think they will. But it's an important part of college football, and I think our tradition here in the state, and certainly with the Gators. And there was a run there where the Gators would win almost every year. And then more recently, it's just been Georgia. I think this is the first time coming up this year where Florida's got a legitimate chance to beat Georgia. I think that the stars are aligning better. I think it's still going to be tough. Georgia's obviously got a great program, but I'm interested.
We could have beat them last year if Lagway didn't got hurt.
Yeah, I agree. And Georgia, it's interesting because they were hot and cold. When they played really well, they may be the best team in the country, but then they would not always play well. So it's interesting. And then Hard Rock Stadium next January is hosting the college football national championship game. So that'll be something that'll be good for the state of Florida. And I don't know if you've probably never been to one because the Gators haven't been in one for a long time.
Killing me, Smalls. You're killing me, really.
But I will say, and you were involved, we had a contingent go to San Antonio.
Yes.
For the NCAA national championship basketball game. And Florida had a good team. But, in the tournament, after the first round, they're losing. They're losing by 5, losing by 10, almost every game. And then they would kind of come back and do it. We're watching the Houston game. And honestly, it was we were almost resigned to a defeat.
We were complaining about the refs all game.
The refs were bad. And it was odd because, it was they kind of shut down our best player in the first half. And you had all this. But then those last few minutes of the game, something just flipped. And then it was before we knew it, they were national champs.
What was funny about that is when that happened, obviously I was sitting next to you for the game. We both looked at each other and went, did that just happen? We were shocked. I mean, it was just, but what a great night. What a great cap to a season. Coaching was phenomenal. The leadership on the team The players were phenomenal. Knowing that they were down by double digits on a lot of these games to come back, it just what an absolute epic season.
Yeah, it's interesting because we hosted the Super Bowl in Tampa in 2021 during COVID. NFL would only allow half the stadium to be filled. The Bucks, I'm a Bucks fan, so the Bucks are playing in it, and that was really cool to be there. But it was like they had the game in hand, so it wasn't like the fourth quarter we knew Tampa Bay was going to win. That was Brady's second year with the Bucks, and no, first year with the Bucks, and so it was neat. But the Gators win was really cool just because it didn't look like it was going to happen.
Right.
And then at the end it did, and everyone just erupted, and people were going crazy, and so it was good. It seems like they're going to be good in basketball again. It seems like they're going in the direction as a program. It's hard with college sports because with NIL and the transfer portal, you really can't build a program like you could in a traditional sense. I mean, it used to be, you had some good freshmen, sophomores, you knew they're all coming back, and a lot of the good ones would go pro after their junior year. But now it's just like one and done or transfer or this or that. And so I think it makes it harder for college sports to to reach the level that it did back like when I was growing up. Because I mean, like, you go in like the 80s and 90s, college football, college basketball, you could follow these teams, and even teams like that were outside of Florida. Like I remember when the Fab Five was in Michigan as freshmen, then you watch them to come back the next season. Like that was when Weber did the timeout against North Carolina. You look at some of the football programs that were good year in, year out. Miami, Florida, Florida State. You just knew that you had a team coming back. Now it's like you could have a great year. You could lose half your team.
Yeah. Running Rebels, UNLV, same thing. Those guys, yeah. So, but NIL is, I'd hate to say that it ruined the game, but it's pretty much at that point. I think that we got to see some reforms on that because every year it becomes free agency. It's how do you plan long term for that?
Well, that's the thing. We were the first state to do NIL, but it was if they're using your name, image, and likeness, they can't monetize that without you getting that. It's now morphed into where players are just getting paid by the schools even, and they have like deals like you come here, we can get you $2 million, and so it's gone astray. But I mean, I was a big believer, like if they're selling your jersey and they're making $10 million off your name and your number, then you should get some of that. So I think there needs to be some guardrails. But I think that even worse than that, though, has been the transfer portal. It's probably too draconian to say if you transfer, you have to sit out a full year.
But they used to have that, right?
It used to be, right, exactly. That's what it used to be. So that really deterred people from transferring. So maybe there is some room there. But to say you can just keep transferring with no end, I think it creates horrible incentives. And actually, the college athletes arguably have more rights than the pro athletes because you get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, you're going to sign a multi-year deal. You can't just go back and go to a different team. In college, you can go get an NIL deal as a freshman, play well, and then you can basically be a free agent and try to get other NIL deals and then go over there. And so that's not good for college sports. And honestly, even though it may be good for some of these athletes in the here and now, it probably isn't good for the athletes long term either.
Look at Jaden Rashada. He originally signed with another team. He went to the Gators. I think he's on his sixth team now. It's crazy. But I'm sympathetic towards these kids. Because when we were having those NIL discussions, I was thinking that, these kids are sitting there and in their off time, they're playing PlayStation or whatever they're playing in there. They're actually playing the team that they're on TV. It was like, how do you not get paid for that? There's just something wrong with that. There's an incongruence
and they were
there.
Limited on they
couldn't take a job.
Exactly. So, I mean, we was at one extreme, now it's at the other, and I think there's probably a happy medium that we could meet. But either way, I do think that I think Florida's well-positioned in football. I think Miami's going to be...
The big question is, what about FSU, Gov?
Well, this is a source of a lot of angst in my household because I've got young kids who are all big-time Florida State fans. My son, first grader in particular, Mason. But I don't think that they are as captivated or worried about the football season right now because we're still in baseball season. So Florida State just got a double bye for the ACC tournament. They're going to host a regional and maybe end up hosting a super regional and potentially could go back to Omaha. And I don't know if you've ever been to the College World Series, but we went last year because you had Florida made it and Florida State made it. So we were able to watch Florida State on the Friday night, Florida on the Saturday night, and then Florida State on Sunday before we went back to Florida. And it is a really, really cool event. I mean, of all the events I've gone to, I'd say it's one of the top that I've done. Because, we've hosted 2 Super Bowls since I've been here. Honestly, Super Bowl is very corporate. And it's not as exciting. I think it's better to watch on TV. College World Series, being there in person is really neat. So I think the Seminole baseball, they got a good pathway. It's interesting.
But you see how you segued from football and you went directly to baseball, right?
But
You're avoiding the question, Gov.
Because I have to say my kids are obsessed with Florida State baseball. They literally are asking me, can we go to the ACC tournament? I'm like, well, it's in Charlotte, North Carolina. They're like, oh, let's go. I'm like, we can't go to the ACC tournament. So, but they will be there for the regional for sure. I guarantee they'll make that happen. I just hope it's not 98 degrees. Although actually it depends. Last year in the Super Regional, Florida State played UConn. And so if you're a team from New England, well, first of all, baseball being from the Sun Belt, you play more, you just have a huge advantage, period. But then these guys coming out, I mean, you're talking about early June. It's still cold up there through April and even early May sometimes. So then they go from maybe moderate to they go to like 95 degrees. It does make a difference on those northern teams. So that's a big home field advantage. Now, it's interesting. The Gators, they made it to the Final Four in baseball. There were high hopes. They got an SEC play, and they were really, really struggling. They started playing well at the end, so we'll see what they do in the SEC tournament. They didn't get a bye at all, so they're going to have to play their way through. But if they can go deep into the SEC tournament, I think that may mean that they get in one of these regionals or something like that.
Now, my Lady Gators making it to the Super Regionals. They won. They're on their way. Softball.
Yeah,
yep.
I think Florida State too. So they're both excellent programs. But I think in football for Florida State, and you probably took glee in this, but 2 years ago they go undefeated in the regular season and win the ACC championship. They had most of their team desert for the Orange Bowl, so they got killed by Georgia. But they come back, and there's high hopes, right? And to go from 1 loss to 2 wins, that's a big deal that happened. So I think a lot of people are just like, I think in this town, there's a lot of people that just like, they don't know what to expect. And they're hoping for the best. Like they get like, maybe you're not going to go undefeated, but I think with the new quarterback, some of the acquisitions, some of the recruiting, I think people feel that they're going to do. Their schedule is not as difficult as Florida's schedule. I mean, there's just no question about that. So we'll see what happens. But I will tell you, my kids, when Florida State had 1 win in mid-November playing Charleston Southern, they are like super jacked about watching this Charleston Southern game. And I'm like, you guys are probably the only Florida State fans that are really excited, but they were like genuinely excited. So they, just having grown up here, my daughter was 2, Mason was 9, and our third daughter wasn't even born yet when we moved here for governor. And so I think it's just something that they've really, really taken to. But yes, they're into the baseball right now. So this is baseball season. They're not even discussing football, but I can tell you, if it doesn't, Florida State opens with Alabama at home in Tallahassee. And so if they can beat Alabama, my kids are going to be so excited about the season. If they can play well, maybe, but
that means DeBoer gets fired then if that happens.
If Alabama comes in and pastes them, then I think the kids are going to get a little bit frustrated.
But is Mason a hockey fan?
He likes it, but I would say his sports are baseball, golf, and football is what he likes. And what I tell him is, I was like, I wish I played golf when I was your age, because I was baseball, which is great, and I played all through college. But if you learn to play golf at that age, the muscle memory, it will stick with you. And even if, obviously, maybe you can play in college or maybe you can play professionally if you're good, and it's tough to do it at that level because there's a very, very fine line that separates those guys. But that's something you can do for the rest of your life, right? Like baseball, I remember when I got elected to Congress, I was 33, 34. And I go up and orientation, I'm meeting all these Republican members, and they're like, oh man, we're so happy to see you. And I'm like, why do they care about me? I'm just a congressman. And it was because they knew that I had played baseball. Yeah. I was the baseball captain at Yale and played all through my life. And they're like, oh, can you do this? And so, I go out there and, we're doing these scrimmages, and I'm hitting home runs. I was still, but I would tell you, you just don't play, competitive baseball. Once you're out of it, it's not the same thing to just go out there. So like, I hit a ball in the gap and I start to sprint, and I'm not used to sprinting like that. I could run 5 miles, no problem, but the sprinting, it was just, and I started pulling muscles and I pulled shoulder and all this other stuff. So it's just different. So golf gives you the ability to always go out. You can do it. You can be competitive, and you can be, you could be good, deep into your 60s even. There's people that are really good in golf. So I think he has taken to that. He likes it. It was funny. We were at the Valspar Championship in Innisbrook, not far from your district. And we're in the Pro-Am, and he's playing with us. And, we're teeing him up in the fairway. So he hits this great drive on 18 down, and he's got about 60 yards left. But, this is the day before the tournament. So there's a gallery there. There's fans. So he hits a 9-iron right under the green, and everyone erupts. And he got so happy, with that. So I think, but I told him in football, I said, listen, it's a tough sport, just because it's like the size and speed of these guys are just unbelievable. You could be, it's like you could have the passion of like Rudy, right? But it's like at some point, it's just these guys are really, really. And so I was like, but the one thing that people always need, they always need a punter. They always need a kicker. And he does throw the football very well. We'll see how that goes. But baseball is what he's into right now. As soon as the Super Bowl goes over, he really flips and really focuses on baseball. And so it's interesting, when Hurricane Idalia came, we had this massive tree in the front yard at the governor's residence, and it knocked the tree over. And so that created this big playing field for us now in the front yard. So we will do, sometimes we do parents versus kids baseball. So it's Casey and me versus the 3 kids, and they're going and doing all that. Yesterday we did me and Madison versus Mason and the First Lady. And so we have this ability. We can do football. We can do other things there. But what we did with the wood from that tree, the movie The Natural, when the tree gets struck by lightning, he makes the bat, Wonder Boy. And I was like, well, there's a lot of wood, so why don't we do? So we've actually got bats that are being made. Did you really? So they're kind of in the process, but it is going to be a commemorative bat, Hurricane Idalia. It's going to have all the stuff, and we're going to do, hopefully have those pretty soon. So, but yeah, it's and he's got a little one. But I'll tell you, it's really not good wood for baseball bats, so it's more of a souvenir than I think something you'd actually use.
That's a great story. Yeah. I'd love to see those bats.
Well, the thing is like Hurricane Idalia, it really didn't hit Tallahassee that hard relative, and this was a massive tree. And I'm down in like Cedar Key, I'm down in Taylor County, I'm down in all those places immediately after the storm. And then I go back home, and this damn tree is just knocked over. And I'm like, wow, that's a really big deal. So yeah, we did that. And so we'll see how that shakes out. But any parting thoughts from you? We appreciate all your hard work on, standing for conservative principles and policies, and really working hard to keep this state free. And you're never, the mission never ends, because there's always people that want to pull us back in a different direction.
Yeah, and look, that's what we have to do. We just have to keep on, as conservative Republicans, remaining vigilant and making sure that we're being aggressive as possible. I brought up this point when we did a press conference, is that we have a supermajority. We have 1.3 million more registered Republicans and Democrats in the state. There's a mandate that they like what we're doing. We just got to continue doing what we're doing.
All right, so you can check out Senator Blaise Ingoglia at GovGoneWild. Is that Twitter and Instagram, all the social sites, or do you just do Twitter?
No, it's Twitter at GovGoneWild. Everything else is at Blaise Ingoglia.
Okay, and so check him out. He's been a real warrior on issues that I know the voters really care about. We've got more battles ahead, but I know with folks like Blaise, we'll get the job done. So thank you.